You're good.
Are we ready? Okay. I'll wait for later.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Okay. Have you ever had an experience that transfigured you? Or maybe shifted your perspective just a little and is now burned into your memory? Or a slow transformation, after a few years you turn around and think, I'm not the same. Most of us will have an experience at one point in our lives, at least, that lets us see things from a different perspective. That kind of moment where time stands still and we get something we didn't get before. We're about to watch a very short film clip, it's less than 2 minutes long, that shows us the earth from a very different perspective. So I invite you to watch it and see if you see something new about the world you didn't see before. I've never had quite the courage to jump out of a plane and see the earth that way. But even watching someone fly briefly through the air lets me see something I didn't see before. In fact, astronauts say that when they go into space and they see our globe hovering against the inky blackness of space, they are transformed. It's such a prevalent experience that they've given it a name. It's called the overview effect. Something about the unexpectedness of this sight, its incompatibility with anything we have ever experienced on Earth, elicits a deep emotional response. Suddenly you get a feeling you've never had before, that you're an inhabitant of Earth. And this is from the Russian cosmonaut Oleg Makarov during the height of the Cold War. Edgar Mitchell, an American astronaut who walked on the moon with the Apollo 14 mission, said something similar. There was a startling recognition that the nature of the universe wasn't as I had been taught. I not only saw the connectedness, I felt it. I was overwhelmed with the sensation of physically and mentally extending out into the cosmos. They were transfigured by this experience in the way that they saw themselves, the way they saw our planet, the way they saw creation. Most of us won't have the opportunity to see what the astronauts see from space, but we do experience transformations as well. Sometimes people experience dramatic conversions where they convert to a religion and they're never the same. Some of us have smaller realizations that things are not always as they seem. A friend of mine commented on Facebook, where I get my sermon ideas, that he got a divorce earlier in his life, and he was part of a religious community that really discouraged divorce, even under most circumstances. And he comments, "While sitting outside my sister's house, it came to me that following Jesus was not about a bunch of rules. Instead, it was about listening to him and what he was saying to me. I felt an immediate sense of relief that God then helped me find a wonderful woman and led me to a church without all the legalism." I think Bill said it perfectly. Transformation doesn't occur when we follow the rules to the letter of the law, but usually when we let those go. Today, the Gospel of Matthew tells this radical story about Jesus, where he himself transforms body and soul in this passage that we now call the Transfiguration. It's the story where Jesus goes up the mountain and becomes temporarily transformed before the disciples. His garments are dazzling white and his face shines like the sun. More than that, he's joined by these two men, the heroes from the Jewish past, Moses the lawgiver and Elijah the prophet. Jesus is literally flanked by the law on one side and by the prophets on the other. His favorite disciples are there, Peter, James, and John. This looks like just the makings of a great party, doesn't it? These six could really live it up. The disciples do, of course, what all good, pious Jews do when faced with the greatness of God. They offer to build shrines or tents or dwelling spaces for them. And I think in the back of their minds, they thought, maybe they'll stay if we build them a tent. Then the party really gets going when a voice from the cloud proclaims Jesus. as the Son of God, echoing what was said at his baptism. This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. It's a transfiguration not only of Jesus, but an opportunity for the disciples to experience transformation too. After all, how many people can say they get a custom-made opportunity for the overview effect in their own lives? But the disciples kind of miss the chance. They are understandably afraid and a little overwhelmed by what's going on around them, and they fall down in fear. But one thing is certain, they miss the party. We observe the transfiguration of Christ today, the last Sunday before Lent begins. You might remember that I preached the first Sunday of Epiphany on January 6th, and I encourage you to celebrate for the next few months, because that's what Epiphany is about. We celebrate, we attend festivities, and we taste the goodness and the sweetness of life. Jesus and the disciples are on this mountain with a life-transforming experience right before them, but the disciples get so focused on their response and their fear that they miss the party that's happening right before them. By the time they recognize their fear and get up, the party is done. That phrase, "be not afraid," that appears so many times in the Bible, I think must appear because when we are afraid and we let the fear determine our futures, we do miss the party that God has in store for us. But the good news is, we get second chances. The thing about transfigurations is that they never happen when we're looking for them. Can anyone attest to this? If you try to force it, it never happens. A pastor I knew in my youth once described a vision he had to me while he was serving communion. He looked up and saw the outline of a human being, and he knew without a doubt that that human being was Jesus. The vision faded, and he continued and gave everyone communion, but the memory and the knowledge stayed with him forever. Bill's devastation after his divorce that had him feeling maybe like a failure as a Christian lifted from him in this moment of unexpected grace, and he realized this isn't about legalism or punishment. He returned several months ago from the Holy Land. He went to Amman in Jordan, where he made music with children in a school, half of whom are Muslim, half of whom are Christian. His moment of grace carries him through several decades of service to God. Whether or not we get to have a transfigurative moment that's dramatic, like the Mountaintop, or a little softer and quieter, the good news is you're all being transfigured because you're here today. This is the message of Christianity. We're all slowly but surely and steadily transformed to be more and more and more like Christ each and every day. Every day there's a voice from the heavens saying, "You are my daughter, and you are my son, and you are beloved." Every day we can remember our baptism. We may not turn into beings of light with dazzling laundried clothes, but we're still dressed to look a little more like Jesus. Now, just because Jesus experienced this transfiguration, does that mean that his life was perfect? Probably not, because after all, he came down from the mountain, as Mary told the children. This model is important for us because Jesus does come down from the mountain. He didn't stay up there on the mountaintop. Not even Jesus gets to stay at the party forever. And I think these little moments or big moments of transfiguration help sustain us when we are down there in the valley. We're now in our time of partying right now in the church year as we wrap up Epiphany. In my home state of Louisiana, everyone is headed off for parades and they're wearing beads and they're posting pictures of the really good food that they're eating, and I'm a little bit jealous. Soon we begin our journey of Lent. On Wednesday, we take ashes and we look inward and we begin to fast. Now, I can't stress this enough. You only have 2 days left to enjoy the party. Ash Wednesday is in 3 days, so we're having a service here on Wednesday night. Be sure to celebrate lavishly now so that your fast will mean that much more. My intention was very good this morning to bring you this dessert that we eat during Epiphany called a king cake. And they're these beautiful cakes that are round, and they have a hole in the middle, and you decorate them with the colors of the season, which are gold and purple and green. And the tradition is you put a tiny plastic baby, which represents Jesus, or a coin or a token of some kind in the cake. And since it's in the round, you can do that, and not even the baker knows where it is. You put it in after it comes out of the oven. And then whoever gets the token is king or queen for the day, and they also have to bring the cake the next year. Now, as a testament to second chances, my cakes failed miserably last night. I mean, they just looked nothing like a cake, and I could not in good conscience bring them to you to actually eat. But we got some muffins back here. But God is a God of second chances, so I'll let this one go. But these cakes are wonderful, and the tradition is that you use up all this flour and sugar and you make this wonderful cake, because during Lent you put those things to the side and you don't eat with them. Now, just because we know Wednesday is coming, does that mean we shouldn't have our cake today? Or does it make the cake that much sweeter, that much more delicious? Yes, because we know that God is good all the time, and all the time, God is good. This moment of grace lasted my friend through his devastating divorce. A vision of Christ during communion sustained a pastor through the trials of his life, including the death of a daughter and the death of his wife. Even astronauts have to eventually come back to Earth. They come back to the reality that humans are, in fact, divided by politics and artificial boundaries. Certainly, the situation in the Ukraine reminds us of this very visibly in our headlines. And I think those astronauts, and certainly I have, been picturing this globe of the Earth that humanity shares, the only one we've got, to give them strength to solving these problems. In fact, some of the astronauts have begun an institute called the Overview Institute that's dedicated to creating peace on Earth based on this vision they had from outer space. Jesus got to have a party on top of the mountain with Moses and Elijah, celebrating the works of justice he was doing in the world. Then he descended back into the trenches, crowds clamoring for him, disciples who, let's face it, sometimes were a little dim-witted, Roman officials who sometimes kind of got in the way, put up barriers. I'm sure he didn't dazzle with light every time he was interacting with someone, but I bet he remembered his experience on the mountain to help him out. We are also doing the important work of transfiguration as a community. Your discernment team is busy listening to visions, paying careful attention to our energy. In fact, we rely on transfiguration. We know that God transfigures us as individuals, as a community, constantly molding us into new creations. I place trust in the fact that God calls us to work in the trenches. Not only that, God makes us dig the trenches a little bit deeper so we can find out who needs our help the most. So you, sitting right here, and myself, standing here, are called to be part of the transfiguration that God is preparing for us right now. Welcome to the party. Amen.